Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. We're out here in front of my vegetable garden. You can see that my garden is starting to take shape for the season, which is really exciting. I love growing vegetables, but those aren't the only things that I love to grow in the garden. One other category of plants that is really important to me to grow is medicinal herbs. So we're going to take a look at the garden, and I'm just going to show you what I have growing and talk about the other medicinal herbs that I plan to grow this year. So before we get into seeing the medicinal herbs that I'm growing and talking about the herbs that I would recommend starting out with, let's talk about why you might want to grow your own medicinal herbs at home. Now, an obvious factor is the fact that if you're growing your own herbs at home, you're not going to have to buy dried herbs or source them from some other place, which is going to save you a lot of money. Another reason is that medicinal herbs, not all of them, but a lot of the ones that we're going to talk about today are so easy to grow that when you grow them, you'll have an abundance. They'll be easy to grow. You'll be able to harvest them as needed. You can go right out in your yard and harvest right as you need it, which brings me to another point, which is that in many cases, fresh herbs are really superior to dried herbs. You know, sometimes it can be really challenging to find a good source for fresh herbs. You know, it's pretty easy to go on the internet or maybe even to some local bulk food store, health food store, something like that, and find a source for dried herbs. Fresh herbs are, in most cases, a lot more potent medicinally. They just have much more powerful medicinal properties in many cases. So that's a great reason to grow your own. So here it's early spring, so things are just starting to come up. But you can see here that I have some spearmint coming up. And if we walk across the path here, I've also got some peppermint over here. Mint is by far one of the easiest herbs to grow at home. If you grow your own mint, you will have an abundance of mint. The most challenging thing about growing mint is keeping its growth under control. Now you'll notice you may want to not take my example. You can see that I planted this mint in the ground. I planted it outside my garden as opposed to inside the garden fence, but you know, mint doesn't really respect fences. So what I do have to do is on the inside of the garden fence, multiple times a year, I have to go through and rip up any shoots that have tried to travel into the garden. Because mint, if you let it, it will take over. Many people recommend growing it in a pot for that reason, or, you know, growing it far away from something else where it's not going to interfere. Now this mint here, as I said, I regularly pull up the shoots that travel inside my garden. And on the other side here is my lawn, which gets mowed. So if the mint tries to travel too much that way, it'll get cut down. So mint is a great one to grow. It's easy to grow, sometimes too easy to grow. As I said, you just need a way to keep it under control. So let's talk about how you would use these different types of mint in your garden. You know, mint, of course, is delicious. It makes a great refreshing flavor. It's great for tea. It's great for just flavoring lots of different things. You can make some delicious infused water with mint. Mint is a great herb for digestion. You know, when you hear about medicinal herbs, most likely what you'll hear the most about is peppermint. And peppermint is mostly what I use medicinally. The spearmint, honestly, I mostly have for flavor. But spearmint does have some of the same qualities of peppermint as well. So it's a great herb to take for digestion. It can help settle an upset stomach. It can help you to, you know, better be able to digest your food. Mint can also be very cooling. You know, if you make an iced tea or something like that with mint, it can be a very cooling and refreshing drink to have in the summer. Mint is one of those herbs that is a little bit contradictory because while it's most often known for being cooling, it can also be warming, depending on the situation. So you can take mint if you want to get more of the warming effect. A hot tea would be a great choice for that. So as I said, mint is great for digestion. Peppermint is also great for supporting your body with a fever. Mint would not be my first choice to use alone for a fever, but combined with other fever-supporting herbs, I find that it does really well. And one other way that I love to use mint is because we all know it tastes delicious. There are some other herbs that you may want to use for medicinal purposes that don't taste as good. Combining them with peppermint can make a much more enjoyable medicine to take. So we'll walk around the fence here and I'll show you another herb I have that comes back every year. And this is, let's see, another seedlings here, catnip. When I say comes back every year, I find that my catnip generally does not live through the winter. Here's another one here, but it self-seeds every year. Catnip is another one that's really easy to grow. Catnip is in the mint family, so it'll have some of the same considerations of mint. In my experience, Catnip should live through the winter in my area, but in my experience, a lot of times it doesn't. I'm not really sure why, but it does always self-seeds. Every year I do get more seedlings and more catnip. So catnip is, you know, similarly to the other mint, is also great for digestion. It is also great for supporting a fever. Catnip, though, is also really great for relaxation. I find that catnip combined with some other herbs can make a really delicious, relaxing bedtime tea. You can also make a tincture with catnip if you don't want to take tea before bed. You know, sometimes you don't want to have too many liquids right before bed because you don't want to be up at night visiting the bathroom all night. So catnip is a great one. I use it primarily for relaxation, as I said, combined with other herbs. Okay, so as we come around the corner to the side yard garden, there's a few herbs I want to show you over here as well. First, I'm not sure if my skullcap is coming up or not yet. So I think that little sprout that we saw there is my skullcap coming up, but it isn't up enough for me to know for sure yet. Now, I do just want to mention, it's very breezy outside today. I actually did not think it was that breezy when I came out here to film this video, but it is. So I'm hoping that the audio won't be too bad, but if it is a little challenging, I thank you so much for bearing with me. So Skullcap is another one that is, again, in the mint family. Skullcap is, like, as I mentioned with the other, well, actually, I'm not sure if I mentioned with the others. Mint is a perennial, at least in my area and probably in most areas. That means that you plant it once, it'll live through the winter, and it'll keep coming back. Skullcap in the mint family is similar. I actually just started the skullcap last year, which is why I'm not 100% confident on recognizing the leaves at this early stage of growth. Once it gets a little bit larger, I'll be able to tell if that's what that is or not. So skullcap is great for relaxation. It's great for sleep. It's not a sedative, but what it is great for is for calming your mind. If the reason you can't sleep is because you're feeling anxious or your thoughts are racing, skullcap can really help with that. Skullcap is one of those plants that I really appreciate growing fresh as opposed to purchasing dried. Some plants will hold on to their medicinal properties a little bit longer when they're dried. Skullcap is not really one of them. That's one that really should be used fresh. And the best way to use it fresh, obviously during the growing season, you can just take it and use it fresh. But when I want to preserve it for the off season, I like to make a tincture. So by preserving an herb like that in an alcohol solution, I find that it really does preserve the fresh properties of the herb almost as well as if you're actually harvesting the herb fresh. So skullcap, as I said, has other uses, but the primary way that I use it is for relaxation and sleep when I need to calm some anxious thoughts. So across the walkway here, we have one of my other favorite medicinal perennials just coming back. This is lemon balm, and I wish you could smell it. It smells so good. So I've got, this one's a little more advanced, so you can see a little better. So my lemon balm plants are coming up and looking beautiful. So lemon balm, once again, is in the mint family. And once again, this is another perennial herb. We will get to talking about some annual herbs in a little bit, but I wanted to mention the perennial herbs that I have in the garden first. I really appreciate perennials because there's something just really nice about doing the work once, planting them once, and then you just get to reap the rewards year after year. So lemon balm, you know, has some similar qualities to the other mints being in the same family, but it also has some different qualities as well. So lemon balm is also great for digestion. Lemon balm it's relaxing. I don't think I would really say it's a sedative, but it is relaxing, it is soothing. It is really great for brightening your mood. It's a good, you know, some people will use it as an antidepressant. I'm not going to say it would not replace prescription antidepressants or anything like that. And on that note, any herbs that I'm mentioning here, I'm going to tell you how I use them. But before using it for yourself, definitely do your own research. Because while the herbs I'm mentioning in this video are some of the safer herbs, that doesn't always mean that they're safe for every person, every situation. There are contraindications to a lot of herbs, certain people who should not take them for whatever reason, or certain medications they shouldn't be mixed with. So go ahead and do your research before actually using any of these herbs. So lemon balm, as I said, I like to use it as a mood brightener. I find that it is relaxing as far as soothing anxiety. I find that, as I mentioned, it's great for digestion. It's also a great support for fever, not necessarily on its own, but in combination with a lot of other herbs. One of my favorite and one of the classic combinations used to really support your body through a fever is a combination of peppermint, yarrow flowers, and elderflowers. And I really love that classic combination, but a lot of times I do like to add some lemon balm and actually some catnip into that mix as well, because I find that it is really helpful. Lemon balm is super easy to grow. It does spread. In my experience, it doesn't spread quite as much as like the peppermint and the spearmint, but it is a spreader, so you want to make sure you keep it under control. Over here, I've got some lavender coming up. And as an aside, don't mind my hoses everywhere. I have been planting things and watering, and my hoses are kind of out all over the place. So this is my lavender just coming up. Lavender is a pretty well-known medicinal herb and useful for a lot of things. So lavender, of course, is great for relaxation. That's probably what it's the most famous for. It has a lovely scent, and it's a relaxing scent. So when people use lavender medicinally, you usually harvest the flower buds. I find that the foliage has a nice scent too, but the flower buds are where most of the medicinal properties are concentrated. So lavender is great for relaxation. Lavender is also great for, for skincare. It's honestly not one of my favorite tasting herbs. I like to use it mostly for aroma, and it can also be good for soothing some irritating skin conditions as well. We're gonna head over here to my apple tree, which you can see I have planted in a permaculture guild with lots of other useful plants around the apple tree. There's a couple plants here I really want to mention, and the first is comfrey. You can see I have several comfrey plants planted around this apple tree. This is a wonderful plant to grow in the garden. So I love having access to these comfrey plants in my garden. They are really great for a big variety of things. They have many uses in the garden, but today, since we're mostly talking about medicinal herbs, I'm going to focus on the medicinal properties. Comfrey is a great support with healing wounds. Now, comfrey is one that does have some cautions, so you probably want to look into that one. The most appropriate ways to use it. For example, most people say that you should not take comfrey internally because it can cause damage. So you're going to want to look into that. That's a controversial stance. There are many other people that say no, it doesn't. The study that found those findings was tainted, but we're not going to get into that today. The point is that you want to do your research before using comfrey. So I find that comfrey is great for healing mild wounds. You don't want to use it on a really deep wound, because what can happen is if you have a really deep wound, you put the comfrey on the wound and it can heal the skin layer so quickly. Normally a wound will heal from the inside out. But what can happen is if the skin heals too quickly, then there can still be damage underneath the skin. And by healing the outside, that can lead to infection, and it can lead to just the wound not healing properly. So you don't want to use it on something really deep. But for surface abrasions and cuts and things like that, I find it really useful. It's also good for treating wounds that are below the surface. Things like bruises, things like sprains, things like that. It can just help those things heal quite a bit faster. So my favorite ways to use comfrey, I like to harvest some of the leaves, which we are probably actually going to do today because I am out of infused comfrey oil. So what I like to do is harvest some of the leaves. I let it dry just on a paper towel on my counter. I don't use a dehydrator or anything like that. I just let it air dry. We want to get the moisture out before infusing it into oil, basically so that it doesn't cause the oil to go bad. Once it's all dry, you can infuse it into the oil, and then you can either use that oil as is, or you can use that oil to make a salve. And then I like to have that on hand all the time to apply to, whatever little cuts, scrapes, bruises, I have kids and I'm out working an active life out in the garden. So between all of us, we tend to need it fairly regularly. So I like to have that oil on hand. The other thing I like to do is if I'm treating something acute. So for example, a couple years ago, I broke my toe. And what I liked to do to help support that, to help it heal a little bit more quickly with the comfrey, was you can make a poultice, which is where you make a really strong tea, basically. And then you take that tea, rather than drinking it, you'll soak a cloth in it and wrap it around the affected area. So it can work really well for that. What I did, since it was my toe, is I made that really strong tea and I put it in a bowl that my foot could fit in, and I soaked my foot, just for a little while each day. I did that for, a couple weeks until my toe was really on the mend. So for things like that, comfrey is really useful to have on hand. As I said, it also has many garden uses as well. So here I have some common yarrow just coming up. You can see these really feathery leaves, and there's another one over there, and I can't see all of them from here, but around this apple tree I have several planted. These plants work together to benefit each other and to benefit my apple tree, but they can also benefit our bodies as well. So this yarrow is really useful. So there are two primary ways that I like to use yarrow. One is, I believe I mentioned before, that it can be an effective support for fevers, especially when you combine it with something like peppermint and elderflower. Taking those together and making them into a tea can just really support your body through a fever. They can help you kind of sweat it out a little bit and just help your body heal faster. So they're really effective for that. Additionally, yarrow is also good for wound care, specifically when it comes to bleeding. Yarrow can also be useful for helping to slow down bleeding or to stop bleeding. So that's another one that is good to have on hand for things like that, for when you need it. So I also want to mention this plant here, which is not something we necessarily think of as a medicinal herb, but is actually, in fact, one of the most useful medicinal herbs that I grow. So behind me is my garlic patch. And as I mentioned, garlic is one of the most useful herbs that I grow. Garlic has some really incredible properties. I find that garlic, for one, I love to use it in fire cider. You know, towards the end of summer into early fall, I like to make up a batch of fire cider because it takes about 6 weeks to brew or so. So I like to be ready for the winter season. I like to put, lots of garlic, onions, cayenne pepper, jalapenos, ginger, lots of really great warming medicinal plants. I like to infuse them all in apple cider vinegar. Once they're done infusing, my wind chime, I sat down over here. I didn't realize it was going to be quite so loud. So I like to, once I strain them out, I mix in a lot of raw honey, and it's just really good for, easing congestion, just for warming over the cold winter months. Garlic, additionally, can be great for just really breaking through seasonal infections that can really affect you. Okay, it's so breezy today. I took my wind chime down and laid it on the ground because I think it was a little bit loud for this video, but it is right near my garlic patch, so it was going to be pretty loud while we talk about this garlic. So while I think most of us agree that the flavor of garlic in cooking is delightful, taking raw garlic straight is not necessarily that same wonderful culinary experience. Taking raw garlic straight can be a little bit overwhelming. But if you want to get the most benefit possible when it comes to dealing with some sort of seasonal respiratory infection or something along those lines, raw garlic, is the way to go. So what I like to do is to take a clove of garlic, I mince it up, fairly fine, and then I just let it sit. Let it sit out on the cutting board for a little bit. You want to let it sit for at least 5 minutes because garlic has compounds that, when they're exposed to oxygen, they create these great antiviral and antibacterial properties that can really help your body. As I said, do all your own research on this. Don't take my word for it. I'm just sharing my experience with you. But what I have found is that garlic can be so powerful. So when I let that garlic sit out on the cutting board for 5 minutes or so and let those compounds develop, what I then like to do is take a spoonful of raw honey, and I kind of shove the garlic pieces into the honey so they're pretty much buried, and I just take that whole spoonful and just swallow it whole. And I find that masks the flavor of the garlic. It at least makes it tolerable. It's a lot easier to get down. And what I'll do is I'll do that maybe a couple times a day for a couple days. You do want to be cautious about if you've been doing that kind of thing for, an extended period of time, more than a couple days or so. I find that garlic can raise your metabolism. So it's something you probably want to avoid before bed. If you do that too close to bedtime, I find that it can just speed up your metabolism and make it a little bit challenging to sleep. And sleep, of course, is also one of the most important elements or probably the most important element when it comes to your body healing itself. So we do not want to deprive our body of that. So we're heading over here to my elderberry patch because I do want to show you one of my other favorite herbs to grow at home, and that is, unsurprisingly, the elderberry plant. So I have in this little fenced area here, I planted 5 elderberries. I think one of them didn't make it, so I think I actually have 4. But you can see this one here is just starting to get the first little buds, so this one will be flowering really soon. And one thing I love about the elderberry is that this plant provides us with multiple sources of plant medicine. So when it comes to elderberries, the berries themselves are pretty famous. They're pretty well known. They have actually been scientifically researched for their medicinal properties. They've been found to have a high level of effectiveness. So elderberries are pretty well known. So what I like to do with elderberries is I like to use dried elderberries. You can also use fresh elderberries. There's two primary concoctions that I like to make with elderberries. One is the classic elderberry syrup that if you've been looking into herbal medicine or natural medicine for any length of time, you're probably pretty familiar with elderberry syrup. That is a great remedy for seasonal infections. I find that elderberries have antiviral content. They also give your immune system a little boost. So while some people do recommend, when you make the elderberry syrup, recommend taking a spoonful of it every day as a preventative, that is not how I like to use elderberry syrup. I like to wait and use it when I actually need it. So what I'll do is if any of us is coming down with something, we'll start taking elderberry syrup, several times a day, right at the beginning. This kind of medicine is most effective, and really most medicinal treatments are really effective right at the beginning. So you want to get that infection kicked out of your body before it has a chance to really take hold, and that would be, right at the beginning. So I like to take elderberry syrup multiple times a day for the first few days of getting sick, and sometimes it will completely ward it off. Other times it will, lessen the duration of, whatever seasonal infection it is. So the other elderberry concoction that I like to make, which is my personal favorite, is an elderberry calendula cold and flu elixir. That's a big mouthful. I have a whole video on making both of those actually. And the fire cider that I mentioned before, I have a video on that too. So I can link all of those in the video description. If you're looking for recipes or a how-to guide for any of those, go there and I'll show you how I make those. So, as I said, we're all pretty familiar with the elderberries. But see, what's actually starting to form now, the buds, are going to open up really soon and be elderflowers. Now, obviously, if I leave the flowers on the plant, they will, assuming they get pollinated, those will ultimately turn into elderberries. But I do like to harvest about half of my flowers in the flower form, because elderflower, I think it's really an underrated, underappreciated, herbal medicine. It makes a delicious tea. And elderflower is one of my favorite teas to make when I feel yucky, when I have a seasonal cold or just some sort of like respiratory infection or something like that. I find that it's really good at just making me feel better. There isn't even a specific symptom I can really point to that it helps, but it's just soothing and it just helps me feel better. But I do think that there has been some research showing that elderflowers are good at loosening up mucus and things like that. So it does have some practical purposes as well. I just really enjoy the flavor and just the soothing feeling it gives me. Additionally, elderflower, especially when combined with the peppermint and yarrow we've mentioned before, is a great support for fevers. So I really do like to have some on hand for that. So we'll take a look at these flowers as they start to open. I'll probably, as I said, harvest maybe half of them or so as flowers, and I will leave the rest to get pollinated and turn into elderberries for us. And then over here amongst the elderberries, you can see we've got more comfrey growing here too. Lots of comfrey, and well, this elderberry plant has gotten really tall. That one is well taller than I am. So in this video today, we have talked a lot about perennial herbs, which are great. Perennial herbs are, as I mentioned before, herbs that you plant in the garden and they will come back year after year. But there are some great annual herbs that I really like to grow as well. Now, an annual plant will only live for one season. It'll get killed by the winter or just its life cycle being completed. So these plants I do have to restart every year, but I have 3 primary medicinal herbs that I always start from seed every year. Sometimes I play around with others, but these are the go-tos. They're all very easy to grow and all really useful plants. So here I have my 3 main varieties that I like to grow. The first is calendula. Now, I cannot recommend calendula highly enough. Calendula is a great plant for the garden. It's beautiful. I mean, look at those cheerful little flowers there. And it grows really easily. Calendula is a cool weather annual, meaning that you can start it before you've even had your last frost, because it can handle a light frost, it can handle a little bit of cold. In my experience, the calendula just keeps flowering all season long. So even aside from any medicinal properties that it has, it is great for adding beauty to the garden. So I just mix this in right with my vegetables. I find that it is good at attracting pollinators, and I just really enjoy it. Now calendula, when you harvest that plant, the flower is the part that you want. And when you harvest a good calendula flower, you'll feel that it's a little bit sticky. That is the medicinal resin, and that is the part that we really want. So I personally like this variety called Resina because it is higher in those medicinal resins. But I think any variety of calendula will probably, this is the only one that I really grow, but if you only have access to some other variety of calendula, then go ahead and grow that one instead. Now, this one is great. Calendula is really famous for skincare, and that is a great, well-deserved reputation. So similarly to what I said about the comfrey, if you take the calendula flowers, dry them out, and infuse them in oil, that will make a great skincare product. It's great just for, regular daily maintenance of skin. It's also good for treating irritations, rashes, minor abrasions, things like that. It's just a really great skincare herb. Additionally, and one I think is one of the more underappreciated aspects of calendula, is the fact that it is great at supporting lymphatic drainage. Now, when you start to come down with something, sometimes you get those swollen lymph nodes in your neck, and it just feels yucky. And that's your body trying to flush stuff out, using your lymph system to try to flush stuff out. So what calendula does is it just helps that system to work a little more efficiently. Just helps your body to be able to flush those toxins or those, bacteria, whatever it is that your body's trying to get rid of, helps it to work a little more effectively. And that's why when we were talking about the elderberry, I mentioned my elderberry calendula cold and flu elixir, which is one of my favorite herbal recipes. It uses calendula because the elderberries provide the antiviral support, a little vitamin C boost. The calendula provides the lymph support. So together they make a really powerful pair, and I really appreciate them. Next, I want to mention chamomile. Now this is my favorite variety of chamomile because it grows the best for me. I've had the most success growing that chamomile. Chamomile is another great plant to have in your garden. It's beautiful. It's got those, these beautiful little mini daisy flowers. They're just so cute and fun. Chamomile, of course, is great for relaxation, great for soothing, great for stress relief, all of those types of things. It makes a delicious tea. It's very soothing just for the flavor alone, even aside from all the medicinal properties that it has. Chamomile can also be really good for skincare too, so that one is definitely worth growing, very easy to grow. And then finally, I want to mention holy basil. So holy basil, also known as tulsi, this is a great adaptogen herb. It's delicious, it makes a wonderful tea. It helps your body be able to cope with stress really well, and it's just a great overall support for your body. It's a gentle herb that you could take daily. Again, look into that yourself, but I really enjoy growing holy basil. Plus it's beautiful, it smells amazing, and the pollinators really do love it. So this is a great herb to add to the garden. So the holy basil is frost sensitive, so I don't have any of that out in my garden yet, but I can go ahead and show you some baby calendula and chamomile plants because I have both of those growing out in the garden. So this is chamomile. This is freshly transplanted out here, and here is my calendula. Over there you can see another chamomile. Now across the walkway here in my blackberry patch, I have one of each of these as well. And if you come hang out with me on my garden tours throughout the season, you'll get to see these plants as they grow, and I'll show you the pops of chamomile and calendula that I have all over the garden, just growing. Hopefully they'll be growing abundantly once they get settled in a little bit. So those are just great annual herbs to grow. One other thing I want to mention is, even though this video is about growing herbs, you may find medicinal plants growing wild in your yard or other places that you may go. And don't forget to take advantage of these gifts from nature as well, because you can find some of these medicinal plants that you get without even having to do any work. So those, of course, were dandelions that we just looked at. And dandelions have lots of great uses as well, both as food and medicine. And I have another plant that grows wild in my yard that I love to use. I'm going to see if I can find any of that. It might be a little early, but we'll see if we can find some plantain. And right here in the walkway of my vegetable garden, here is some plantain. So this is pretty small. It's early on in the season, but this is one of my favorite wild medicinal plants as well. And you'll find this growing. This is broadleaf plantain. There are other varieties as well that can also be used. And honestly, I find this growing everywhere in the area where I live. So it's worth looking into what medicinal plants grow wild in your area as well. So as the season goes on, I'll show you these plants as they grow. We'll harvest some of these herbs together, and I'll just share a little bit more about how I use each of these. But for the purposes of this video today, I just wanted to give you guys some ideas and a starting point of some herbs that are really easy to grow in your home garden, and herbs that will just really helpful with getting started in herbal medicine. So thank you so much for joining me today and taking this little walk around my medicinal garden. I hope you're having a great day, and I can't wait to see you soon. I'll see you next time.